Hello and welcome to the podcast. Every moment is sacred, where we interweave meditation and healing into everyday life. I am your host, Rain Elizabeth Stickney. Now, let us begin. Hey, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I am happy to introduce you today to Christina Sommers, who is my guest on this show. We have a healing conversation together, and I want to give you fair warning that there is mentions of domestic violence in this conversation. So take good care and listen closely. This is a wonderful conversation about a single mom with a 19-year-old daughter, and she once was married to a drug addict with narcissistic tendencies, and the domestic violence that is mentioned is between her and her ex-husband. Luckily, Christina has chosen a wonderful healing path in her life, and she has also chosen to use the knowledge and wisdom that she has gained over the years of her healing to help others. She is the host of the Loving Your Life Again podcast, available on Apple Podcasts and many other places you find wonderful shows like that. Christina loves the outdoors, and in her healing journey, she learned how lonely it can be to be in a difficult marriage, a toxic relationship, and she wants to bring awareness to others who may also be experiencing the same or something similar. Christina has a strong and sincere desire to guide others to make the best decisions for themselves. Christina believes in peace and joy, as do I. I hope you do too. And she is working on creating a community of like-minded women so that nobody has to feel as alone as she once did. She offers tips and tricks and tools to heal the body, mind, and spirit. You will find many of her pieces of delightful wisdom in our conversation. I truly enjoyed talking with Christina, and I am so happy to share with you all that we talked about. You can find Christina not only through her podcast, Loving Your Life Again, but you can also find her on Facebook and Instagram at Reload in Christ. Her website is by the same name, reloadinchrist.com. And something that I really love about what Christina and I shared together is that we began with gratitude and we ended in discussing what faith is. What is faith for you? Do you have an experience of faith or spirituality in your life? There are many different experiences of faith, and it can be beneficial to notice one's own experience. I feel very grateful to Christina for sharing so openly and freely, and even with joy and humor as we discuss a difficult topic. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence and is ready for help, here is the national hotline, 800-799-7233. It can be so wonderful to reach out for support. You can do so by finding a healing practitioner that is just right for you, Or you can reach out to this hotline and see what services they can provide to help you along your healing journey. Again, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. Now let's jump in as Christina is sharing her gratitudes. Listen all the way through to a wonderful conversation about faith. And once again, thank you so much for being here.
I am grateful for being able to have these conversations, to be able to, in some ways, share our stories and how they can offer healing for not only ourselves as we're talking about our stories, but also offer that healing for other people. I am grateful for my pets, even though sometimes they are like 2-year-olds forever, but I am grateful for their unconditional love. Like, you're having a down day, they come and just bring your spirits right back up.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, with the weather, I'm grateful for the sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate rain, and I like the rain when it's not all the time. So being from upstate New York, where we had gray weather like 95% of the time, I appreciate and really love the sunshine. So
Yeah, I love the sun too. We had a nice spring day over the weekend and the sun came out and it was actually warm and I was in a t-shirt, and I'm up here in Vermont, so it also can be very gray like upstate New York. And that sun and that blue sky was just magical.
Yes, absolutely.
So we get to have a healing conversation today. And one thing that I love about healing conversations is that we get to look at our lives openly and honestly and vulnerably and discover what is or what are the healing moments that are naturally arising, what gifts are life giving us. Sometimes they can be challenging and sometimes they can be joyful, but I believe that healing is happening all of the time.
Definitely agree. And if I wasn't going through this journey myself, I might question that. But yeah, like one small example of how you're constantly healing all day, every day, I think for me personally is noticing those thoughts. Until you get control of them, I don't know if they'll ever stop, but I know I have an abundance of automatic negative thoughts. I heard somebody refer to them as ants one time. It's like those little ants start marching around your brain, and it's like, how do you get it to stop? So that is definitely a continuous healing, is to being present and noticing those thoughts. And is this true? And then if it's not, how can we reframe it? Because you can't just get rid of thoughts, you have to replace them. So, like, what's the next best thought that you can think that's true for you? And continuously improving it until you're at the place you want to be. And then if it is true and it's something you don't like about yourself, find the tools you need to use to start improving that area so it's no longer true.
That's right. We can discover something more true because often those negative thoughts are not true, and there's something more true that's either underneath them or somehow present at the same time.
Yes.
What is an example of an ant thought that you've had recently?
One of the biggest ones I'm struggling with is being lovable.
Oh.
And it came up one time, anytime when my husband and I were together before we separated, anytime he had fear that I was going to leave, because like patterns repeat themselves, right? He would always say, "You don't want to leave me. You'll never find anybody else who will put up with you." There, that's just one of like the minor one. There, nobody will be able to tolerate you. Nobody will like you. Nobody will love you. And that is one that constantly, I don't know if there's more to it. I think there might be more even further down, but I haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, that's one that I'm constantly reframing as I am lovable. He was using, and I have to reframe it as to, okay, why would he say something like that to me? Oh, well, he was using it for his benefit to keep me stuck, to keep me there. So he was continuously getting what he wanted out of the relationship, as opposed to what it was actually doing to me. And even now as to, am I worthy? I am. I am. But you have to constantly remind yourself until that automatic goes away or is
Mm-hmm.
lessened and then reframed as to. So anytime it pops in my head, I'm like, okay, I am lovable.
Mm-hmm.
I am. And then I would start to find the ways in which I am.
Yes. And let's even say it like this. I am lovable, like without a question at the end. I am
Oh, I didn't
lovable.
even hear that. I didn't even hear that coming out. Yes, I am lovable.
Yes, and you
Exclamation
are.
point.
Exclamation point. And you are so lovable, Christina. I just love you and you exude love. Like I love you and you exude love. And I love to see how you are with your animals. And we might even hear them here and there in this conversation. And I know how loving you are for other people, your passion around your ideas of coaching, your passion around helping others, your magic and your passion in your podcast. You are so lovable, sharing the love all of the time. I want the world to embrace you. And forget
Thank you.
that ex-husband, whoever that is, he missed the boat.
Yes, he did. It's all his loss now. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I wish him the best and I hope he finds what he needs to, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously like hurt people. So I don't think he was doing it intentionally to damage me and cause harm, though it did. I still wish the best for him, which is
Mm-hmm.
not me or in my space. So
Mm-hmm.
wherever he is, whatever he's doing, I hope he's finding his own form of happiness. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel on board with that too. I also wish him happiness. And I'm so sorry that he caused harm by his actions and his words. What is your experience of healing over your lifetime? What, if you just were to take a broad stroke and kind of look at your life in the lens of healing, what do you already know about yourself?
I am stronger than I ever thought I would be. And you never know your inner strength until you're presented with challenges. Now, would I ever ask for these challenges again to prove how strong I am? No, but clearly they all have life lessons. And healing is also like a journey, it ebbs and flows. Once you finally think you get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm all better, something will come up, something will trigger you, and they'll be like, and you're like, wait, what just happened? And then that's where you pause, you take a pause, and you're like, okay, what are my tools? Bring out those tools, especially if you've stopped using them. I found there was a period of time recently started to go back to work. I changed jobs. Whenever I have a change, I kind of lose my routine, if you will. And I was like, what is going on with me? Why have I like regressed so bad? What I was emotional all over the place. Like I had no energy. I was drained. And I just didn't like that feeling. So like healing too, you notice the work can be hard while you're doing it, but you notice once you've gotten to the other side, how far you've come if you start to slip backwards and you're like, oh, I don't like that feeling anymore. I don't want to be
Mm,
in that anymore. I want to be back to where I was feeling good and full of energy and full of joy and just love and light. And I was starting to feel that yuck. And I was like, what has changed? Oh, I'm not doing and fill in the blank of all the tools that I've been using. So it's like, okay, start bringing them back in one at a time so you don't overwhelm yourself. And then I was getting back on to pace and then I could stop it once I got back to a better spot. Okay, now what else is going on? Was there another trigger? Because triggers are almost like spotlights to say, okay, there's still something there. There's still a little tangled knot of yarn that you need to untangle.
mm-hmm. That's right. I see triggers the same way. They can be gifts if we learn how to unwind them and find the treasures that they're holding.
Yes, definitely.
It takes
When
so much bravery to do that.
And it's funny because even just to start noticing what is triggering you takes awareness. So it's like you got to bring yourself into a place where you're not just on autopilot going through the day as I would previously say, I was just barely surviving. Like there had to have been more to life than what I was living, because I wasn't really living. I was just going through the motions of every day. And that's no way that anybody should live. Like there's so much
Mm-hmm.
more to life than just barely surviving. So it's like, okay, what do I need to do differently? What's going on here? And then the trigger of, okay, why is that a trigger? What is it triggering in me? Where did it come from? And then what can I do to heal that area so it no
Mm-hmm.
longer triggers you?
Mm-hmm. Wonderful perspective. I can tell that you've really loved yourself so completely to become this aware and this caring about what you're experiencing in this world.
Going back to the lovableness, I feel like in order to receive other people's love, because other people can love you all you want, but if you don't love yourself first, you won't be
Mm-hmm.
able to receive it. And it takes a lot of, when you've been so conditioned for so long with all these patterns, if you will, it can take a lot of work to reverse that and actually see you for who you truly are. And like one of those ways I know that we've previously talked about is like meditation. It's
Mm-hmm.
taking that time to get quiet with yourself, to hear what your inner self is saying, to hear what, and then get past the high level, if you will, the surface level, and get down into what is actually true. So you can pull that up to the surface level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, reach down deep and bring
Because
it up to the light.
you have all the answers inside you. One of the most recent lessons I've learned, because I was trying to look for all the answers outside of myself, and surprised you have to go inside, because everything affects everybody differently.
So true. So true. We both could see the same sunset, Christina, and we could see different colors in the same sunset. It could affect us in different ways. It could bring up different memories for each of us. We could have different fantasies about it. Same
Right.
sunset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All the lens we choose to look out of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up meditation, and I really enjoyed being a guest on your show and re-listening to that episode. I hope everyone listens to it. Tell us the name of your podcast, Christina.
Loving your life again.
Loving Your Life Again. It's a really beautiful show. And in re-listening to our conversation, I could really hear what a skilled interviewer you are, what a skilled conversationalist. The way that you brought me through that conversation was so lovely and welcoming and warm. And I really appreciate you sharing your voice with the world in this way.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm learning as I go, and I really appreciate the feedback, because you never know how it's being received. But I very much try to speak from intuition, speak
Mhm.
from, obviously, you kind of always have like an outline of an idea of where you want to go, but really let the conversation flow as to, and what's meant to come out will come out.
Mhm. Absolutely. Is there a healing moment that you're moving through or something that has happened in your life that you want to speak very specifically about?
It's funny. One of the things I think most recently that I've been challenged with is I was having a conversation with somebody, and I was reliving one of the moments. It was essentially a scene in the relationship I was in. And I was told previously by multiple people that, yeah, I've done a good job at healing, but I've healed from like an aerial perspective, from an above, like I haven't actually embodied it yet,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's like I've seen myself go through this. I've accepted that this has happened, but it's like I haven't processed through that it's happened to actually me. And I had a hard time with that at first, until this conversation that happened months ago came flooding back in my memory after I had this conversation with a completely unrelated person. We're talking about something, a particular memory, and it was like a flashback, almost like a PTSD moment. I was there in that moment, reliving it, and I'm like, oh, this is what they mean is to it have, I need to actually feel the feelings as if I was already there, as if I was like, even though I was, your nervous system protects you, right? So even though it's happened to me, I never actually processed through the actual events that happen. And I was able to talk about it from like not an emotional aspect. I was feeling the feelings inside, but I wasn't getting emotional on the outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So not only embodying the healing journey of the various pieces of the trauma I experienced, but then also from very well-meaning, I have to believe people are very well-meaning when they ask questions like this, but it's like the person was like, you know, that with that, because then I was talking about how then we reconnected a few years later, like, and going through the history of we were together and then we separated and then I allowed him back in and then we separated and through that course. And the person was like, well, you know what that sounds like, right? And I'm like, well, I do, but you don't understand unless you've walked through the experience. I can try to explain it to you all day long, but you'll never truly understand what it's like to have been manipulated, to have been in such a place. And I've learned now from such a place, people who are easily manipulated, a lot of times they don't know their authentic self. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they stand for. So that way, that makes it easier for people to come in and kind of like pull those puppet strings. They can find where your weak points are and then manipulate those weak points to get you to do what they want you to do when they want you to do them and so on. So I was trying to explain that aspect at the same time. If that conversation had happened even a few weeks prior to that, it probably would have like completely and utterly destroyed me in the aspect of feeling like I needed to defend myself, feeling like, right, what is wrong with me? Why did I keep going back? And that's not, people are well-meaning in their questions along those lines, but at the same time, to the person who is receiving the question, it feels like you're getting victim blamed. It feels like you're getting shamed and blamed for trying to make the best decision to do the right things in the right time. So one, the reward of saying, okay, this work that I'm doing is working, because I didn't need to defend myself. I came from a very point of fact place of trying to explain it in a way that they would understand. But then at the same time, this one trigger is making me process through. So I'm still feeling all of those emotions and all of the surrounding events of that time. And even through the years of the relationship, keep popping back up and having to work through them and remembering the tools of getting into that quiet, still space, going back to what is the truth, and then also allowing the feelings to flow through. This is something I just recently learned. We have a tendency, we don't like the feelings, so we stop them. When we stop them, they're not being fully processed, and essentially they're not being fully healed, released, and let go, recycled for the greatest good of all. Whereas if you let the feelings flow through, and most of the time it's like, 90 seconds, I think. If you let them flow through, if you feel the emotions, if you let it go, it's now out. And if it comes back again, it'll be much less severe until it's completely out of you.
Yeah, that's right. So if there is a trigger that happens in life, whatever it is, if it is the kind of trigger that we can process readily, we might feel that heat or chill or stuttering or shaking or discombobulation. It can happen in all sorts of different ways for 90 seconds. We might hold our breath, hyperventilate. It could be anything. And you're right, it will pass through in 90 seconds. But for those other moments when it doesn't happen, another thing that our body does is it can take about 20 minutes to process. That's like another milestone in the processing of trauma that appears. And then also what I hear you describing is sometimes the brain actually takes that experience and stores it away for another time. And then it could be years later, and we're remembering that relationship or something that happened because of a present trigger, but it brings up the past. And the
Mm-hmm.
brain is like, ooh, let's release some of these feelings and thoughts and memories and experiences that we've been holding. We meaning like brain, body, sense organs, mind, heart, all of it. Like we're kind of a nice puzzle of different parts, each of us are. And
Mm-hmm.
then those feelings or those things that were stored are finding their way through. And I love how you're talking about emotions flowing through and learning how to not keep them close, but actually let them go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like whenever I would get triggered of any sort of way, it was like I need this to stop. It's almost like when I get triggered, I start to have a panic attack. I start getting
Mm.
super, super anxious. And it's like, and I do not like that. Like I struggle with anxiety anyway. So I pretty much have it well managed for the most part. So when something comes flooding in and it's like, I can't even function because I'm having a panic attack. It's like, how do I get this to stop? And I've learned now is to don't stop it, breathe through it. If you need to tap to help settle your nervous system, go through some tapping.
Mhm.
And that's often what I'll do, especially if I'm like in a work situation. There was a time I got really triggered by something at work months ago, and I was on the verge of a breakdown, and I'm like, I need a few minutes. And I went out to my car and I put on a tapping meditation. I tapped through the anxiety, and it
Mhm.
like immediately settled my nervous system down. So then I could
Mhm.
actually process through later
Mhm.
on what was going on. But it's finding what tools and keeping them readily available and trying through them until they work. There's been times where I felt like, okay, I'm going to go tap, and tapping didn't help. So I'm like, okay, what do I do next? Okay, let's try
Mhm.
actually like doing a meditation.
Mhm.
Let's try going for a walk or doing some kind of exercise,
Mhm.
having a little dance party. Sometimes
Mhm.
the energy needs to physically move out of your body, and stillness doesn't work. So it's
Mhm.
trial and error and even as they present themselves, each presentation may have to be handled in a different way. So
Mhm.
it's knowing what works for you and being willing to trial and error until you find the one that gets you back to a settled state, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that settled state. It can be a homeostasis or just a nice neutrality or equanimity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you mind saying something about the tapping? Because some people might not know what it is, but I believe you're talking about the tapping where there's special parts of the body that can be physically tapped to help release the energy that wants to move through.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And yeah, exactly like you were saying, you tap through some meridian points. And what the meridian points are, they were even used in like acupuncture, but instead of actually using needles, you're putting pressure on those various points to help settle your nervous system down. And typically, how you go through a tapping meditation is you have a setup statement that you do using like the karate chop point. So, like the side of your hand, and you'll usually do the setup statement like 3 times or a variation of it 3 times. And then you'll focus on, and this sounds very counterintuitive, but you focus on the negative thought first and tap through saying, you can say the same statement over and over again. You can adjust it. There's really no wrong way of doing it, but you tap through, like there's the eyebrow point where it's like where your eyebrow meets like the top of your eye, then there's the side of your eye, underneath your eye, then under your nose, under your chin, your collarbone, under your arm, which is like for women, it's like the bra strap line,
Mm.
and then the top of your head.
Mhm.
And when you cycle through the negative, and then you come back through on the positive, what you want to feel, how you want to be, and what then focusing on the negative first will settle your nervous system down first. So you're going through the negative, but telling your nervous system that you're in a safe place, that you don't need to
Mm.
have that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, that you're in a safe space to process through that emotion. And then the positive is to like reaffirm what is true.
Beautiful description. So clear.
Well, thank you. I think that's the first time I've ever tried to explain it out loud. So I've been doing it for about a year and a half now. I think I've learned it.
Mhm.
And yep, it's one of those as to when I cycle through the various tools, that's one I readily pull out. I'm
Mhm.
grateful I learned about it because it definitely helps. But again, that an example of how not all tools work for everybody is I've tried to show my daughter a few times when she gets upset about something, and I'm like, well, let's tap on it. And she's like, that doesn't work for me. I'm like, are you sure? Let's try. And she's like, Mom, I have. It doesn't work for me. And I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
So it's trial and error. What works for you? And don't try and force yourself to do something that doesn't feel good, because that's just going to only make the situation worse, not better.
Mhm. Such wisdom. Could you give us an example of a statement that you would begin with if you were going to do some EFT tapping?
So like on, if you will, anxiety, like the setup statement would be, even though I feel all of this anxiety, I completely and fully love and accept myself.
Mm.
Even though I feel all these anxious thoughts, I completely and fully love and accept myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, in a variation of 3 times that you would say something along those lines.
Mhm. That's so beautiful. And I right away, even without tapping or doing the exercise, just the statement gives me such a feeling of embodied presence with what is difficult and also the welcoming of what is better.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You're not only acknowledging where you're presently at, but where you would like to get to,
Mhm.
and at the same time, and it is possible. Like essentially, you're telling yourself that it is possible to get there.
Mhm. It is. Yeah. And for me, the way that your beautiful statement is landing for me, there's also an immediate acceptance, like an immediate bettering. So, oh, the anxiety, the anxious thoughts, even though I'm feeling all of these anxious thoughts, I love and accept myself completely. And the
Mm-hmm.
pairing of those for me is bringing together two parts that really need to meet. The
Oh yeah,
loving part really needs to meet that anxious part, and the anxious part really needs to meet that loving part, and they
mm-hmm.
get to be together.
Yeah. That brought up something I think I was just hearing. It might have even been today or over the last few days, of those parts that we don't like to feel, that we try to stuff away, that we try to keep in their boxes because we don't want to feel them, is often they pop up because they need love. They
Mm-hmm,
just need that love.
mm-hmm,
They need to
mm-hmm,
know that part of you, even though that part of you is there and you might not always like to feel it, you still love it, whether it's anxiety or whether it's fear or whether it's self-doubt or, you name it, that they're, those feelings are there for a reason and they just need your love.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. True. I completely agree with you.
Kind of like, how would you talk to like your kid or your best friend if they were having a
Mm-hmm.
down moment? Would you shame and blame them away, or would you go and offer them love no matter where like they're super anxious? Would you yell at them and say stop being anxious and shove them away, or would you be like, okay, like let's listen, why are you feeling so anxious, like, and love them through it?
That's right. And how meaningful and healing to turn that light of listening inward and to
Mm-hmm.
really hear all those parts that are living inside, and they get to have their say, any age, any experience. How beautiful to listen inwardly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you're more you should be the most valuable person to yourself, because like you have to live with you, um and you should treat yourself as such. So if you're going to give that time and space, well, I'm so talking to myself right now, to everybody else, you need to give it to yourself too.
Yeah.
We give ourselves our best, we tell other people what we need to hear ourselves the most, don't
Hmm.
we?
Absolutely. And it's good. So once again, how valuable to listen to ourselves, because if I hear myself saying to you or our dear listeners something that I actually need to hear for myself, if I'm listening, I will hear it too. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
remember, wait a second, I'm also talking to me.
Yep. 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 I definitely was just talking to myself as I need to listen to myself better.
Mm-hmm.
I need to stop quieting those parts that need that love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So earlier, when you were talking about the recent trigger and kind of bringing up a past relationship, were you referring to your ex-husband?
I was. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there was, when you're in a, how about one thought at a time? Sometimes I like to start multiple and I need to slow myself down and bring myself back.
We're
So
listening.
any toxic relationship, a lot of times there's the ebb and flow. They'll start off by like love bombing you and telling you all those things that you want to hear. They'll listen, they'll ask you questions. So they'll hear those vulnerable points. You think they're listening, they're asking, they're wanting to know because they care. What I recently learned, it's not so much that they care, they're listening. They want to know these things so they know how to control you in the future. So there, with this relationship, there was the ebb and flow of you're wonderful, you're amazing, I can't do this life without you, I love you so much, fill in the blank, to when things weren't going the way they wanted it to go, it was all the mean and ugly things. And this particular event, I don't remember even what happened, but it spiraled out of control. It was right before the second time I left, because I could not have myself or my child subjected to that situation. We got into a fight about something and he got so angry. He punched a hole in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
He stomped his foot on the ground and put a hole in the floor. He spat in my
Wow.
face.
Oh.
And like when he punched the hole in the wall, it was right next to to clarify. He never actually touched me, but the threat was very real and was right there, because where he punched the hole in the wall, it was right next to my face.
Mm-hmm.
Where he stomped the hole in the floor, it was right in front of where I was standing. He spat in my face. I would try to like walk away. I would try to leave and he would take my stuff and throw it out the door. So I couldn't leave, and then stand in front of the door so I couldn't leave. So it got really, really ugly, really, really quick. So I was like, okay, this is spiraling worse and worse and worse. It's time to go. But just reliving that whole experience it was like I was right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know where I was going with that.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you're sharing. Yeah. It's understandable that your nervous system would protect you from feeling all of that all at one time, and that some of it would be stored away so that you could, in a healthy way, go to the healing and interweave into your life and go into the release and interweave back to the day to day and do it in a pace that works for you. That's a lot to experience all at once.
Yeah. And so when the fight, like I think that was the last fight before I started packing my stuff, but things would like progressively get worse.
Mm.
And then I left. And then each time we got back together, and for anybody who hasn't heard pieces of my story, there was two reasons why I kept staying in the relation, kept going back, kept trying to make it work for so long. One was my faith, and two was I always wanted my daughter to have her father in her life. This was before I knew the damage she was experiencing from our unhealthy relationship as well. So I thought they had a really good relationship. I thought she was in a good spot. But every time he came back, I was like, okay, this time we're going to do it this way. And I would try to put different boundaries up and put different time constraints on us to, okay, we're going to like go back to actually dating first. And and then the last time we dated for nearly a year before I allowed him to move back into the house. And then the time between when he started spiraling down and to the worst as it ever was a lot longer, but still the pattern still repeated itself. And that's one of the things that you need to look at when you're in this type of relationship and you're deciding if it's time to stay or if it's time to leave, and if it's time to try again and let somebody back in, or if it's like, nope, done, it's not going to change. I truly believe people can change, but they have to want to change. I was trying to change him. I had so much hope and faith that he was going to change. I thought my faith projected onto him, or me being a good example, or me doing whatever I knew how to do, whatever I was led to do, would heal him, would fix him, but it didn't, because he didn't want it for himself. So it's like, look at where the other person is at. Are they willing to do the work? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, I'll do this thing, but then as soon as whatever the parameter is, like, for example, one of the things that we did before the actual final separation was I tried to like write up a contract with him, if you will, of saying these are, and even like, not just this is my expectation, but this is my expectation. What are your expectations? And we came to an agreement together as to what was acceptable and what wasn't. 2 minutes after we signed it, he was breaking through every single one of them. And I'm like, okay, so that really didn't mean anything. So it's like, are they willing to try? If they're willing to try, then keep yourself safe, but do what you need to do. But if they're not willing to try, and it's just actions speak louder than words, if their actions aren't lining up with the words that they're saying, and you find yourself in the same cycle over and over and over again, it's time to cut your losses and start your own healing journey. And it doesn't mean it's over forever, but it might be. And that takes a whole nother grieving process that you need to allow yourself to heal through. But you can't keep sacrificing yourself for the sake of somebody else, because that's no way to live your life either.
Yeah. We each need ourselves whole and complete and sacred. That's the best way to live one's life, I believe.
Yes. And if somebody is constantly beating you down, whether it's verbally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, that's not a way to be whole and complete in yourself. And if you're not whole and complete in yourself, you can't be whole and complete for anybody else, especially your children.
Yeah. I'm glad that you left. And I also have so much compassion for how hard that journey must have been.
Well, thank you. It is definitely one that, and I think that's why feel so passionate about sharing about it, because how many other people are stuck in this cycle of staying with this. I'm almost positive I'm not the only person.
You're not the only person. I assure you, unfortunately. Fortunately and unfortunately, like, you're not alone. Yes. And also, I'm sorry that it happens more than once.
Yes. And it's unfortunate, but we live in a broken world. And like, that doesn't make excuses for it, but we live in a broken world. So we need as much love that we can share and join together and spread to help other people pull out of those yucky situations. Our voices need to be joined and shared and whatnot. And so people know that they're not alone, because it is a very lonely space to be in.
Yeah, it can feel so alone. Some of my healing journeys have felt very alone because I've made decisions of not having contact with loved ones for reasons that felt sincere to me, but created difficulty in my family because I made a different choice than other members of the family were making. But similar to what you're saying, there's a moment when if a person is being harmed, and if a person has choice to exit the situation, please exit. It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You are worth so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, we each are worth our own light and love and care and clear thinking.
Yeah, definitely.
Can we touch back in on the violence just for a moment?
Absolutely.
Because I was not in that situation with you and you know what you lived through, would you say that was more of a situational violent moment, or did you find your ex-husband to be characterological violent? Like his personality was really like it was through and through, or was it more like there was a specific trigger where he felt threatened and so he was reacting to a specific trigger?
So I think it's a combination of, so he did have major anger issues. He
Mm.
would go into fits of rage, but it was very rarely ever violent or very rarely violent directed at anybody. It would come
Mm.
out in other forms. Like if we were in the car and he got angry, he would start driving very aggressively, which was
Mm.
terrifying, especially when it was after me and my daughter were in a head-on collision. He had no respect for us and our fears of being in a vehicle after that. But he very rarely ever got physically violent. He would start with words first.
Mm-hmm.
And in his body language, he would get like very puffed up and very big.
Mm-hmm.
And usually because there was so much fear there, I would and also for the sake of, I wanted to try and keep the peace, not only for myself, but also for the kids. So I would often just back down.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it was something that, well, I think after that incident that I was referring to, I knew how far it could escalate. So I was like, I don't want to take a chance of that happening again because it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would always back down before it got pushed to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he had a lot of anger inside. He had a lot of rage.
Mm-hmm.
But most often he would just get really loud and really big and make a lot of threats or goes storming out the door. So obviously provoked, if constantly pushed and pushed and pushed and not given in, he has the capability of going that far. I just never pushed him to that point.
Well, I'm glad that you kept yourself safe. And again, I'm so sorry for the hardship that you went through. And I also continue to be glad that you chose to take care of yourself and your daughter and make a different choice and create a new life in your own way, in your own time, at a time that was right for you to do so.
Me too. And I think that also goes back to listening to your intuition, listening to your inner voice. Even though, would I have rather not gone through any of it? Absolutely. But there's a reason. I truly believe there's a reason why we go through things that we go through, and they make us who we are today. So like, if I didn't go through that, I don't know if I would like the person I am today. Like, I don't know who I would be, but I wouldn't be me as I am now, because a lot of what I have inside comes from from my experiences and coping through and educating myself on how to heal from it after the fact.
What are some of the gifts that you carry with you that you learned through your experiences, or perhaps you were just born with? What are some of those gifts that light you up inside and that you really value?
So, right off the bat, and this isn't just from my experience, but I've learned about them because of my experience. So one, I would call what people refer to as an empath and a highly sensitive person. I didn't know that those were things when I was growing up. And even like my growing up years, I was made fun of. And also with my ex-husband, I was made fun of how much I felt. I was made fun of for how sensitive I was. I would often be called like a crybaby or, other things along those lines. Since I've done this healing work, I don't see those as they were portrayed to me growing up as weaknesses. They're a superpower. I'm able to connect with people on a whole different level than what others can, because I can truly tap into and hold space for their emotions and relate in a way that a lot of others can't. And that allows them the space to hear themselves. Because sometimes our hearing ourselves, we need to verbally be saying it out loud to actually hear the words that we're saying, to hear themselves, to hear where they're at. It also allows me to connect with people strangers or people that I know, like I even find there's sometimes our strangers are just like drawn. And I'm like, I don't know why, but hey, you have something you want to say, I'm more than happy to listen. And if I have something wise to share with you, I'll share. Otherwise, I'll just listen. Or I need to learn better with my daughter, but of asking, are you just sharing information for the sake of sharing it? Or do you want my input? Because sometimes I offer my input and she's like, Mom, I don't want you to fix it. That's one of the downsides of those characteristics is I'm also a fixer. Like I want to fix, I want to heal. I want everybody to feel happy and joy and amazingness. And then the other is just learning how strong and resilient not only myself is, but people in general. You have all the tools you need within yourself. It's just tapping in and taking the moment to truly listen and learn what tools are available and trial and error. And yeah, so it's really learning who I am. I guess that's a completely different one. But yeah, I'm starting to actually learn who I am. I don't have to pretend to be who everybody else wants me to be. I can actually start to figure out what do I like? What do I want to do? What don't I like? What is that? Nope, we're not doing that. Or yeah, absolutely. That sounds amazing. When you spend so much time under essentially somebody else's control, if you will, you lose your sense of identity. You lose who you are. It was like when I was at work, I had all the answers. I was good there. I could make decisions there because it was very black and white. When I was at home, I was like, as far as like, do you want this or that for dinner? I don't know. If we're watching a show on TV, what do you want to watch? I don't know. I don't know what I like. What am I allowed to like? I don't know. Because I was told for so long, even if I was asked my opinion, then I would be told no. So I'm like, so you kind of lose yourself. So yeah, refining who I am as a person.
So important. And I love that you named being a highly sensitive person and an empath as a superpower. That is right on.
Yes.
And I'm so happy to hear how you're discovering yourself and really learning how to live from within, moving outward rather than in response to the external environment. So you get to discover, I do like that. I do not like that. And you get to be true to yourself in that way.
Yes. Yes. And too often I think we try to do it backwards from the outward and it doesn't work that way. Or it's a lot more challenging that way. I think that's how I started. But yeah, any journey, it's a journey. It's definitely a journey.
Yeah. And I really relate to that, learning about oneself. And my short story of that is that when I was in graduate school studying psychology and the expressive arts, I discovered that my ego, there's a lot of negative talk about an ego, but we all need an ego to grow and develop as a human being. And a properly structured ego is one that has all the pieces in it, where when a person is ready to dismantle that ego, the ego can be dismantled without a crash. If you think of a structure of a house, if the house is built in a sound way, you can also take the house apart and remodel it without the whole thing falling down. But if the structure of the house is not sound and it's a little mishmashy in some places, you try to do a remodel and you discover, oh no, this was never built properly. And I was one of those that had some mishmash qualities in my structure, in my egoic structure. And there I am in my 20s and graduate school discovering this about myself. And similar to some of what you said, I had no idea what I liked. I had no idea what I truly liked. And luckily, I had this wonderful group of friends. There were about 8 of us, and we would spend time together regularly. And I got to practice saying very simple things like, could you pass me the water? I don't like spicy food. I love root beer. I mean, these are very basic things that often young children go through. My
Mm-hmm.
childhood was a different kind of childhood, so I missed some of that and was very responsive to my external environment. But then when I was a young adult and I was able to discover, ooh, I really like this bread with the cranberries and the nuts, and it's freshly baked. This is delicious. It was such a joy to
Mm-hmm.
discover very simple, basic things about my personality and
Right.
to honor those things in me and to honor myself.
That's amazing. And yeah, it's when I was having a conversation with somebody one time about that, and I would ask the question of like, are you having fun? And I got the response of, well, what's fun? And I'm like, well, it's subjective. I can't tell you what's fun for you, but I can tell you from experience, it's a trial and error. Like I'm in my 40s and I'm just learning what I think is fun and what I don't think is fun. So like you're never too old, you're never too young, but it is a discovering process. You're not going to
Mhm.
know until you try it.
Mhm.
So give yourself the benefit. Try something. If you don't like it,
Mhm.
now you know you don't like it, and don't ever no is a complete sentence. You can say no and you don't
Mhm.
have to justify the reason why.
Yes, I love that. That no is a complete sentence. So well put.
Yes, that's what I'm still learning on because the recovering people pleaser in me.
Hmm.
Well, I
Well,
don't know if I want, and then giving all the reason. No, if you don't want to do something, you can say no. You have permission. You can say no. You're in control of your life.
hmm hmm well, I love how you are becoming and like a butterfly that's drying its wings in the sunlight, just fluttering and using the moment as you will for your own growth and development and healing.
And I love that image of the butterfly. I heard that one time and I'm like, oh, that is a perfect depiction of, yes, thank you for bringing that back up.
Sure. And I heard you speak earlier of embodiment and embodied healing. So, just as we begin to close, how are you doing in your body right now?
I feel like I'm doing really well.
Hmm.
I'm learning how to, and it's a lot with meditation, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, of identifying those feelings and then noticing where in your body are you feeling them, and then sending your breath, sending your love, sending your intention into that area to give it that love it so needs to heal and recover and process through. And it's amazing how much lighter you begin to feel when you start
Hmm.
actually letting the stuff out. And
Hmm.
I feel like there's times and I know I'm never going to fully get rid of my pain or my mobility issues, but I find a lot of times when I'm holding on to and storing more, the pain left from my car accident will come back. And
Hmm.
more so, there's various reasons why it'll flare up. And one of those, if I start holding on to my emotions too much, it
Hmm.
is because then I find if I slow down and I'll do more yoga and more, because I'll do various forms of working out. And sometimes if I'm feeling really sore, I'll do yoga, and that mindfulness of breathing through. And I find the emotion comes out at the same time, starts to work through it a little bit more. And I'm a little bit freer.
Hmm.
The pain isn't so, the area isn't so tight and the pain isn't as intense.
Hmm. What a wonderful connection you're making between the emotions and the pain and the flare up, and how you go to yoga so that you can be mindful and breathe through and release.
Yeah. And I would have never made that connection if I didn't start on this journey. It's amazing how all the tools are interconnected and interweaved, and
Uh-huh.
how you
Uh-huh.
can incorporate them all.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. What a wise soul you are, Christina.
Well, thank you. It only
I,
comes from experience.
well, I don't know, as an empath and as an a highly sensitive person, I imagine you were born from wherever you were born from, whatever your belief system is, but that you were born with these gifts of being able to really consider the other person and also yourself.
Yes. Yes. I truly like those are definitely strengths. It's funny that like these are all things I've known about myself and have been working on reframing from the negative because I was put down about it all my entire life to reframing it into the positive. And then I took like the strengths test as part of a different program that I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. And literally all of the things on top speak to that connectedness, the empath, the learning is too. I want to know more, like tell me more. And I'll get asked on a regular basis. I'll be involved in a conversation and I'll just start keep asking questions. And they're like, why are you asking so many questions? And I'm like, I want to know everything. And it's not from I want to use harm. I want to know. I care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, it is definitely a combination of both.
Mm-hmm. What a natural curiosity I hear you describing.
Yes. I used to call it nosiness. Now I genuinely care and want to know because I care.
Mm-hmm. 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 Great reframe. So often at the end of the conversations I have with people for this podcast, I ask about a healing moment, but we've been so clear about talking about healing this whole time. I'm going to ask you a different question.
Okay.
And I heard you touch on faith in a couple of different ways. And faith can mean so many different things. And two things that faith can mean is we have faith in people or faith in the way that events evolve. We can also have faith in God or a creator or spirit and that kind of a larger entity than ourselves. And I'm wondering what kind of faith is true for you? Where does your faith touch you in your life?
Absolutely. So growing up, we really didn't grow up in any kind of faith base. There was no that I can remember of spirituality. Like I remember my mom saying that we got baby baptized and we went to church until me and my sister lost interest. And then we would just go for the holidays. And then
Mm-hmm.
when we lost interest in the holidays, and this must have been when we were really young, because I don't even remember going. And any other time we went to any kind of church would be when we stayed the night Saturday to Sunday at our friend's house, and those friends went to church. So it was very like growing up had very little faith, any kind of basis, any kind of teaching. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I don't know where it came from, but I felt like I needed to get my daughter baby baptized the same way I was. So I started exploring. Long story short, with that, I fell into the Christian church. And so now I believe in God, but at the same time, my Christian faith also kept me stuck in my marriage for so long. So I still, God, and I'm of the premise now is to, I don't want to turn anybody away. Everybody has, like you said, everybody has their own view of, I call my higher power God, and God has revealed, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say him, but I don't believe God is actually a him. I believe God is energy. God is the creator of everything. Like God is bigger than a he, she, any kind of gender. But
Mm-hmm.
that's too complicated to like say over and over and over again. But God has showed himself in such a way, real tangible way. I cannot ever say there is no higher power because I have a relationship with that higher power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I I feel like I'm overcomplicating things, but I think I'm working through my own stuff with this too, because different scriptures, if you will, kept me stuck. But there's also scriptures that have set me free. So I still feel like I would be, I don't even like labels though. I believe in God. I believe aspects of the Bible, if you will, but I feel like some of it has been misinterpreted. Too much is taken out of context and used to hold people captive as opposed to setting it free. And I truly believe that God's intention was to set people free, not to hold them captive. So I take what I read now with a grain of salt. and I evaluate it like against itself and what the true meaning behind it actually was, as well as what feels right, what feels aligned with me. Because in exploring on this healing journey, I've been introduced to so many other facets that I think at a high level, if people were to take and use religion, would say that's against the Bible. That's against the Bible. But the more studying, if you will, I haven't dove deep enough in it, but the more I dig into these other areas, I feel like it's not against it. People are, again, misinterpreting. I could be wrong. I don't want to steer any. This is just my personal feeling. And I'm along the line too, is to, if it feels good, if it feels aligned, I have that relationship now. If God doesn't want me practicing that aspect of fill in the blank, whatever facet you want to use, whatever healing modality you want to use, if God didn't want me using it, it wouldn't help. It wouldn't feel right. I would feel more yucky. I'd feel more resistance. And I can feel when I'm in alignment and when I'm not. So as long as I feel like I'm staying in that alignment with my higher power, I'm good. If I'm not, then it's like, okay, what's wrong here? And then the over analytical piece of me needs to dig into the whys behind what's actually going on. So very long answer to what should be a simple question, but
oh no, I opened it up. I opened that doorway, and I'm so glad you took me right in.
Yeah, but I truly believe like my faith is one of those. I know what I believe, but trying to explain it in a way that brings people in and doesn't immediately start closing doors or getting almost, this doesn't bother me anymore, but essentially getting condemnation because what I'm saying might not be scripturally accurate, but I'm truly following my internal guidance system as opposed to what the world was telling me to do, not the world, the religious people were telling me to do when they were saying that I essentially shouldn't get divorced and it's not okay to get divorced. And when God was telling me it was okay to. Like I felt like I was released, and then I would hear a sermon that was saying, oh, have you tried this yet? You should not get divorced. God can fix it. So I'm like, okay, God, am I not hearing you right? So like that whole back and forth for too long. Listen to your internal guidance system. Listen to God within you as opposed to what religion is trying to tell you, no matter what religion you are.
I hear such discernment. You really had to discern which voice of God was the voice to listen to.
And still, sometimes is that my voice or is that God's? Like, and you sit with it long enough, you start to learn what the difference is, but still sometimes it can be a little challenging.
Yeah. And once again, we're in that space of listening, of having that courage to really listen.
Yep.
Well, on that note, Christina, is there anything more that you would like to share or add, or how can people find you? What would you like to say in closing?
So just a reminder, healing is possible. Healing is a journey. It's almost like an onion and will come in layers, but you are worthy of healing. You deserve to be healed and whole. And it can be hard work, but the work is worth it when you get to the other side.
Thank you so much for listening and for listening courageously. Again, if you or someone you know is in an experience of domestic violence and you or the person you know would like to reach out for help, please try the domestic violence hotline, 800-799-7233. You can call 800-799-7233 for help. You can also find your favorite healing practitioner to help you through any challenge, and they will assist you, point you in a direction of your own healing. And as Christina said, healing is possible. You are worthy of healing. Thank you so much for listening. It has been a great joy to have your presence here in this podcast. I welcome you to celebrate the joy and wisdom in your life exactly as it is. And I welcome you to feel loved, fully loved, exactly as you are. www.rainelizabeth.org